911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Code 1, repeat, code 1.
I got an emergency. What's your location?
Daddy, what's happening?
Good evening. All day long, deep underground, they worked at the site of Canada's worst subway disaster, looking for clues, hoping for answers.
The bitter ice storm has battered the city, leaving trees and power lines frozen solid.
And at least 2 deaths are being blamed on the big freeze.
Well, we have flooding in most parts of the city. We've had many calls from all over. As a matter of fact, we have it right here in the police building.
About 400,000 homes are still without electricity.
Stand by the traffic sign. You pay back there, man? Good to go? Okay, stand by. Here we go. You pay that, man? Let's go. Stand by. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to GNN's special report on the 4 pillars and the 10 professional practices of Continuity of Operations Planning, or COOP. Although COOP is now the responsibility of Emergency Management Ontario, both EMO and the Ministry of Government Services have played a strong role in establishing, implementing, and maintaining COOP. At EMO, senior executive commitment is ensured through legislation and policy statements in the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. We'll be joined by Brian Miller, President of Disaster Recovery Institute Canada, who will explain the cyclical nature of the planning methodology behind the development of the 4 pillars and the 10 professional practices. Here's some background. The Government of Ontario is responsible for maintaining countless important public services. The 4 pillars of COOP are the essential core components that are required to run any of these services. They are people, information, technology, and the workplace.
Attention. This is an emergency evacuation announcement. All employees should follow their area fire warden to the designated safety area.
Hey, Fred's the fire warden. What do we do now?
We cannot deliver our services without our number one resource, people. Is there a plan during an emergency to ensure that government employees are safe, protected, and able to work? Let's look at pillar number 2, information.
Hi, how can I help you?
I need to take care of this right away, please.
Sure. What do we do now?
What happens when you suddenly don't have access to critical information that is required to perform your job and deliver a service? Is there a contingency plan? Let's look at pillar number 3, technology.
Yeah, we found it. It was a short or something. It's out now. It's the central server for the district communications department, and it's down. What do we do now?
What happens when things suddenly go wrong with the technology that we need? Let's look at our last pillar, the workplace.
Continuing with our lead story this morning, a 4-alarm fire has engulfed the government building at 123 Main Street. Fire crews have contained the blaze, but the structure has sustained significant damage.
Was
we will
that my
continue
office?
to follow this breaking news throughout the day.
Dad, what are you going to do now?
What happens when business is interrupted and you can't go to the workplace? Can the show still go on? Welcome back. We're now joined by Brian Miller. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Kevin.
So, how do you begin developing a business continuity program?
Organizations need to follow the professional practices, and the first professional practice is to launch a project or project initiation. And within project initiation, we need to establish a responsibility structure from the top of the organization all the way down to the people who will implement it, the people who will gather the information and feed it into the plan development. So everybody has a role to play. The executives have a role to play, the managers across the organization have a role to play, and they have responsibility for their own business silos. And then employees have a role to play to tell us what are the issues that they face and make contributions to the overall development of the plan. A business continuity coordinator has to be the person who works with that and brings it all together and manages all of the phases, the tasks, the resources, and the time associated with it.
So, after initiating the project and gaining executive support, what's next?
The first step after that is to assess what might happen to us in terms of various disasters. So we call that a threat and risk assessment. We want to know all the different events that could interrupt our business services and what is the probability of those occurring, what is the severity should they occur, and what controls might we put in place to help reduce the severity and the probability for any given threat.
So, now that we know what can happen, how do we know how this is going to affect our business service delivery?
The next step is doing a business impact assessment. We know that our services will be interrupted because the risk assessment told us that that was the case. But we also know that should an event occur, we cannot return all of our services back to their regular levels within any particular period of time. So what we want to do is understand each service, what priority it takes and what it depends upon. So we do something that's called establishing recovery time objectives, so that we look at each service and we say, when does it need to be up and running? At what level of service, and what is its prioritization in terms of overall service delivery? Because we know that within the 4 pillars, we will not have access to all of our people, we will not have access to all of our information, our data, our technology, and our workplace. So with limited resources, we need to focus on certain of our services first.
Okay, the analysis phase is completed. How do we action all of this?
Well, what we have to do is develop recovery strategies or options for recovery. So we would look at each of the business services and we would say, what do we need in terms of people, information, technology, and the workplace? So it comes back to the 4 pillars again. And how many of them would we need? Where would they need to go? And how are we going to actually deliver those services? So what we're trying to do at this stage is say, who, what, when, where, and how are we going to do all of this? And do the research that goes behind that to put some very specific plans in place, and we call those the recovery options or the recovery strategies.
Now, what happens when the disruption is the result of a serious emergency? How is it handled, and how does it relate to the previous planning?
In the emergency response phase, we're dealing with answering questions, we're dealing with conducting an assessment of what's happening to us as an organization, how bad are we hurt, who is hurt, and what services have stopped being delivered. And we also then try to prioritize what really needs to be done first based on what we're seeing in that assessment. And at that point, we start to gain control of the event rather than the event controlling us. So we can put the processes in place to work with all of the stakeholders, and we can get organized through an emergency operations center and incident command centers. We can have incident command structure in place, and then we can move on to actually dealing with the emergency and gaining control of it.
A lot of analysis, strategizing, and planning has been completed up until this point, but how do we know this information can actually be used during a business disruption?
That's a very good question, because often we see organizations that don't do the documentation part very well and becomes quite confusing. So one of our objectives in putting the documents together is to make them easy to reference and very easy to read. So as a user, when you open the document, you can see exactly where you have to go. You don't have to be fumbling through that document and spending minutes trying to find out what your role is. So it's really key at this point that we make every attempt to make those documents very easy to use and very easy to read. And sometimes we see documents that have, for example, very fine font in them, and they become quite difficult to read, because we always have to remember that these documents may be used under adverse conditions. We may not have good lighting. We may be using a flashlight to read the document itself, so it must be written in such a way that is actually quite easy to use. But the document really assembles all the information we've gathered so far and puts it into an organized structure so that the individuals can use it.
There seems to be a lot of important information in the plan. How do people know what to do with it?
Well, once we have the plans themselves are only documents, and individuals across any organization will need to use them and reference them when an actual interruption occurs as a result of a disaster or an emergency situation. So we need to do two things. We need to, one, create awareness that we have this document. Let people know right across the organization that we actually have a document that's available and accessible. And the other thing we need to do is provide specific training to individuals on how to do certain things that are within the document. Because some of it can get quite complex. Some of it is not what we normally do on a day-to-day basis. It's in fact quite different than we would normally do. So we need to go through a good training process to familiarize ourselves with it.
Is there any way to ensure that the COOP plan will actually work when an emergency occurs?
Well, Kevin, a plan is only a document. And in order to make that document something that we have confidence in, to give us validity in the plan, we in fact need to test it. But there's two aspects to this. We need to test the plan, test the documentation, ensure we identify any gaps, but we also need to provide the people who are named within the plan a good opportunity to practice. So like anything else we do in life, if we don't practice it, we probably won't be very good at it. So there's many things we can do through those tests and exercises, but always we test the plans and we exercise the people.
We all understand the importance of communication. How do the professional practices deal with communication during an emergency?
The 9th professional practice is crisis communications. And the concept of crisis communications within a COOP or a business continuity environment is simply to ensure that we're capable of providing the right information to the right people at the right time. And there are many stakeholders that are involved in any event that interrupts our services. Some of those stakeholders would be our clients or society in general. Other stakeholders would be the executive of our organizations, our own employees. And each one of those stakeholders has a different interest in terms of how this event is affecting them and the information that they require. So crisis communications is really managing all of the aspects of the emergency and providing people with the information so that they understand it from their perspective.
How do we make sure the COOP plan does not conflict with other emergency plans?
Professional practice number 10 is entitled Coordinating with External Agencies. There are many organizations that we will have to deal with when an emergency occurs. So our job is to identify those in advance, ensure we know who they are, introduce ourselves to them, and have a dialogue on what role they play versus the role we play, so that when an event occurs, we don't conflict with each other's responsibilities. I think what's essential here is to understand that business continuity plans or continuity of operations plans are the tools that we use to manage events that interrupt our service delivery. However, business continuity plans are not static tools. They are very dynamic tools, and we have to keep them up to date. The whole process is very cyclical. The outputs of exercises, the outputs of continual risk assessment, the outputs of continual business impact assessment must be brought into the plans themselves, and the plans have to be ready to activate at any particular time that we need them.
Thanks very much, Brian, for your time and expertise today. Much appreciated.
It's been my pleasure, Kevin.
So, there are the 10 professional practices. Let's see how they are applied to our 4-pillar scenarios.
What do we do now?
Don't worry. You know I'm the alternate. Come on, follow me.
So, as you can see, we may have all the technology we want. Our facility might be intact. But if we don't have people, we can't deliver service.
What do we do now?
Well, that's okay. We'll just switch to our manual backup system. Use these forms. We should be able to take care of most of our customers this way. Hello, Barb. That's right, we've gone down too. Yup, we've just switched to a manual workaround. Our data was backed up, so we can recover everything.
So, the second pillar is information. That could be paper-based information, but typically it means data. Everything we store on computer, on phone systems, including email and BlackBerries, that's all data. We need that in order to provide service to our client base. But we always need a manual backup option.
What do we do now?
Well, I've checked our coop. There's only one critical application on that server, and I've notified the business area. They'll be without a data feed, but they have a manual paper workaround, so we have a little time. You should call the IT help desk right away and let them know what's happening.
Okay, I'll call IT help desk.
IT help desk, Amanda speaking. How may I assist you?
The central server's down.
Yeah, we're getting lots of reports. We're in the process of bringing the backup server online now. Don't worry. It would really help if you could get a damage report, so do that as soon as you get back online.
Okay, how long?
Wait about 10 minutes and activate your local procedures. In the meantime, we're sending an IT recovery team to assist.
Okay, we'll wait 10 minutes and then we'll try to log back on. Okay, I gotta go.
So, the third pillar is the technology that supports the data and our ability to use it, and the communications ability of an organization. Without the ability to communicate when a disaster occurs, we cannot respond and we cannot recover.
Dad, what are you going to do now?
I have to make a call. Hi, Tony. Yeah, it's me. I saw the news. No, it's okay. It's okay, I can work from home. Yeah, I'm online now. I have all the info I need here. Sure, I could finish it up right away and send it in. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
And the fourth pillar is the workplace. We need a place to work. In fact, during a disaster, organizations would typically have a certain segment of their employee population working from home, or even a hotel room if need be. The workplace is flexible. Well, that's it for today. You've been watching a GNN special presentation on the 4 pillars and the 10 professional practices of continuity of operations planning. I'm Senior Information Correspondent Kevin Anderson. Goodbye for now.
And studio clear, and that's a wrap. Good job, everybody. I appreciate it. What do you mean? What do you mean we didn't get it? Well, we've only got 20 minutes left on this live link. All right, we're gonna have to do it again. Sorry, Kevin, we're gonna have to do this again.
I don't want to do it again.
I know, well, you have no choice. We've only got a little bit of time here. Okay, here we go. Everybody, stand by. Okay, here we go. Stand by.
Emergency services have cleared streets. Businesses are opening their doors and people can...
Government officials have confirmed that the flood control system is fully operational.
Today, emergency crews have restored power to many homes and life is returning to normal.
A lightning strike on a government building in Red Lake completely destroyed the building.
With the Red Lake fire, as much as it was a devastation, especially to those staff that are closest to it, it's also a great opportunity for us to learn.
I think we are much better prepared than we used to be, but each day we're a day closer to the next big emergency.